Of Veracity Hill. I am coming to you from the new Defenders Media office, and it's still a little echoey in here. I've still got bookcases to fill. A couple weeks ago, I gave you a tour of the building, and I'm starting to settle into my office here. And I've got bookcases up, and I've got flooring that's going down. Some of it's already done. And I just wanted to take a moment of my day to tell you about where I was last week at the annual meeting of the Evangelical Theological Society and the Evangelical Philosophical Society. I'm not doing a regular live stream with the episode production because, well, we're not set up yet. So I'm taking this sort of impromptu autumn break while our team at Defenders Media moves and while we get things set up. So perhaps in a week or two, we'll have the regular live stream back up and running, and we'll do the full production with Gabe over at his new spot. But we don't even have the camera or the cords that are run yet between our two computers. So there's still a lot of setup to do for that. But I want to take today to just talk to you about the Evangelical Theological Society, and I'll describe some of the talks I went to. This is the annual meeting of evangelical theologians across the country and really across the globe, because there are people who travel internationally to come to this meeting. It's a great opportunity for theologians and philosophers with their EPS to present papers on their research. And so it's nice to sort of get the updates, to be thinking about Christian worldview in this way by the top-notch scholars. It's also a great opportunity just to fellowship with others who are kindred spirits, men and women who are in similar work situations, similar life circumstance as ourselves, and we can spend time with each other, hear about what each is going through, get meals together. I had an opportunity to get meals, 3 meals with my friend Mike, and it was a great time to visit and catch up. To network with other people. He introduced me to some people he knew. I introduced him to some people I know, and hopefully he'll get a speaking gig out of one meetup that we had. But I just wanted to run through some of the talks that I went through and give some reflections. Now, these conferences, it's a 3-day conference. They're just loaded with papers. And in my younger years, I would try to just pick one every time. But sometimes you just need a breather. Sometimes you want to visit with people for 30 minutes, and so you miss out. So what I did ahead of time was I scheduled out on the plane which talks I wanted to go to. And some of them I'd be okay missing if it didn't happen, but there were ones I particularly wanted to go to. So I've got that list up here for myself to review. Now on Wednesday, which was the first day last week, one of the first talks I went to was by a friend of mine, Ben Whittington. Not Ben Witherington, the third, but Ben Whittington, who lives in Tennessee. And he gave a very high-level philosophical, he's a philosopher, he gave a high-level philosophical talk about chance and counterfactuals. He used some symbolic logic. So I went up to him afterward and said, Ben, you don't have to bring the cookies down to the bottom shelf for me, but put them on the middle shelf. So he was describing this paper a little more so for someone like me, a theologian. Another talk that I attended Wednesday morning was William Lane Craig's talk, Anthropological and Christological Compositionalism. High-level talk, but it was on theology, anthropology, and Christology, which are fields I'm interested in. And I see what his project was. Not persuaded what he was arguing is the case. I had some concerns. I shared some of those with a philosopher, and he sort of sympathized with me about that project of Bill's that he was working on. But nevertheless, it was a engaging paper that Bill Craig read, and that's part of the enjoyment of these annual meetings, is to be challenged and to have our minds stretched. So if you are someone who is a lay person in your church, and maybe your church doesn't do adult education, or maybe the adult education is just too basic, right? Maybe you have like a grad degree in theology and you're not really fed at a higher level at your church with regard to the intellect. Sometimes that happens. Church is for a lot of things. Living life together with people, living in community with each other. But if you don't feel fed at a high, rigorous level, then coming to ETS or EPS is a great opportunity to do that. And there are commonly regional meetings. So those regional meetings may occur at different times of the year, but November, the week before Thanksgiving, is always the time to do the annual meeting. So it's really easy to just mark your schedule. This past year, last week, it was in San Diego. Next year, it's in Boston. And the year after that, I believe it's in Denver, if my memory tells me correctly. So it switches cities. Sometimes there are common cities that you see, like it was in San Diego maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So there are some repeat cities from time to time. Okay, so let me run through then on Wednesday afternoon, sorry. Wednesday afternoon, I attended a expected talk, we'll say. So Greg Gifford of the Masters University. What can the natural person know? 1 Corinthians 2's use of spiritual versus natural knowledge. I say expected because this was a very reformed, very Calvinist paper on this scholar's take on 1 Corinthians 2. Very common for the Calvinists to think that in 1 Corinthians 2, Paul is simply drawing hard and fast categories of the natural man, all people who are not saved, and people who are saved are like this. Well, I don't share his take. His paper was more so an extrapolation of the Reformed categories. Greg did not really draw on scholarship, so it really was kind of more just a general systematic theology in the line and style of Wayne Grudem. But I asked an interesting question to Greg because I'm not sure he considered 1 Corinthians 3, verses 1 through 4, that Paul is setting up his audience with these categories in chapter 2. And I think these categories are simply exemplars. What do the exemplars look like? And the reason why I think that is because in 1 Corinthians 3, you have what Paul considers to be brothers acting like the unregenerate people. Now, if we play with these hard categories in chapter 2 that the Reformed believe exist, then you are left with this quandary, because then the people of 1 Corinthians chapter 3, that is the people that at the church at Corinth, are not acting like saved people. They are not saved people because these are hard categories. And saved people act this way, and unregenerate people act this way. But the people at the church in Corinth, Paul calls brothers. So they are saved in Paul's mind. So the reason why I get a little passionate about this is I asked Greg, and he just did not give a good answer. He said he basically punted to the soft text there in chapter 3 about how Paul is addressing them as if they were like this. Well, you can't be as if they were like this in chapter 3 if chapter 2 are hard and fast rules. So I would agree that he was being a little soft and treating them like they were non-believers, but that's because I also view those categories in chapter 2 as soft categories or exemplars. This is what the natural man is like. This is what the spiritual man is like. And so we should seek to exemplify those categories in our lives. So I hold a different take of Greg there, but that was a fun paper, more so up my alley on my strong interests. Then later in the afternoon, I went to see one of my former professors, Ashish Naidu. He was the gateway to historical theology for me, and he was presenting. His paper was titled "The Ministry of the Word in the Early Church: Lessons for Global Evangelicalism." Simply he drew on church fathers, and it was nice to attend his paper. I usually just go to his paper regardless of the subject because I know it's in historical theology, and it's great to see him and visit with him for a little bit every year. Then there was an informal reception for my friend Mike Lacona, put on by Zondervan Academic for his book, and it was a great opportunity to mingle with others who had helped promote the book. You know, we put out some videos earlier this year. Defenders Media that produced for Mike at his YouTube channel. And Mike's been a good partner of mine for many years. I don't agree with Mike on everything, and including some of the things in the new book. But, I'm glad that he is a man of integrity, and he will put his ideas out there, even if he thinks he might get pushback. So I admire him for his integrity, even if sometimes I don't agree with him, and that's okay. I think that's a sign of maturity when we can disagree with people and yet still be loving toward them, fellowship with them, live life with them. I think it's spiritually immature to ostracize people who you disagree with on minor issues, on secondary or even tertiary, or you know even worse, to the degree. And churches divide over such minor issues. I think that's unfortunate. That evening, then, Wednesday evening, there was the EPS reception, the Evangelical Philosophical Society, which I'm also a member of. And I really enjoy the EPS in some different ways than the ETS. With the EPS, you have the philosophers, and they've got some topic subjects that aren't of interest to me, just hardcore philosophy, hardcore ontology, metaphysics, hardcore epistemology. I love philosophy of religion. I have found myself spiritually fed and grown by reading articles in Philosophia Christi, the journal of the Evangelical Philosophical Society. So I would encourage you to become a member of the EPS if you enjoy apologetics and you want to go deeper. Philosophia Christi is a great way to do that. And when you become a member of the EPS, you get the journal each year, multiple journals a year, and a great service that the members of the EPS offers to the theological, philosophical community and the evangelical Christian church as well. Greg Gansel at that reception gave a great little talk on C.S. Lewis's Inner Ring, and it's a little essay I believe that Lewis wrote on the desire that many of us have when we see a ring or a circle of people that we just desire to be a part of. And I'm recalling here from Greg's teaching, since I haven't read the Lewis essay. Essentially, we just have almost this envy that we want to join the inner ring, but it's not all that it cracks up to be. And so I'll have to hunt down that essay by Lewis and give it a read. But it really was a thoughtful remark, just brief remarks by Greg Gansel at the Talbot School of Theology. And I appreciate the years that Greg has put into the EPS. Also, I know that Doug Guyvett, who's a retired philosopher, he had finished a term at the EPS on their executive committee. And so I go to the business meetings of the EPS every year. I enjoy getting those updates and I'm trying to help out the EPS where I can, but I really appreciate the work that they've done, even for me personally. Moving on to Thursday, I attended one talk. It was good, but I didn't get a ton out of it. It was on grace out of salvation's well, early American Methodism, and John Wesley's Eucharistic piety. So it was on the role of the Eucharist in Methodism. And while those subjects do interest me, sometimes papers can be hit or miss. Either the topic isn't quite what you thought it would be, or the presenter is not exactly an enthusiastic reader. So that paper didn't quite leave me with a strong impression. Then moving along, I attended the EPS plenary session on divine hiddenness and evidence for God by Charity Anderson. There wasn't a ton that I learned new in that session. Sometimes that happens as well. Charity was simply trying to continue the conversation, move it a little forward on divine hiddenness. There was a stellar afternoon section of papers on looking at the archaeology of the church where the Council of Nicaea took place. And I attended a number of these within the section. I think there were 4, maybe 5. And there was a nice talk by Mark Fairchild on whether we've discovered the actual church where the Council of Nicaea took place. And he presented these arguments, and I was like, oh man, this is it. We found it. Well, and then Brian Litfin followed up with that and just gave a stellar response as to why we shouldn't think that that was the case. So we're still maybe on the lookout. That tends to happen. You get excited when, there's a proverb about, how one man seems to be right, but then another comes to examine him. So That was what happened there for me. But I did step away for one session Thursday afternoon to attend my friend Matt Heckel's talk. Did Augustine refute a straw man, revisiting the Pelagian controversy? And Matt there was responding to Ali Bonner's work. And Ali Bonner has written a book, an expensive book, called The Myth of Pelagianism. Now, my area of expertise is semi Pelagianism. So this is on a subject I haven't gone super deep into, but I'm familiar with. I'm conversant with the subject matter. And I also know that there are YouTube debates over this now, whether Pelagianism was just a straw man all along. The idol killers here. I'm sure he'll appreciate this. So Matt Heckel's paper gave some nice pushback on Ali Bonner's work, but I think Matt's maybe on the right track and should do a little more investigating. So one of the points of method that he critiqued of Ali Bonner's book was the skepticism that she placed on the extant on the non-extant writings. So Bonner basically says we can only trust the extant or the surviving works of Pelagius. And if we do not have an extant work, then we should approach the issue with skepticism, a default position of skepticism. So if there's a work that doesn't survive to us, but Pelagius quotes it, he might be taking it out of context. So we have to have skepticism about that. So he took, Matt Heckel took concern over this because he argued that Augustine was well intended. And that was the large thrust of his argument. It was more fuller than that. So I'm just synthesizing it here, cutting it down for you. And so my question to Matt, and I hope he does look into this, that we can see if we look at Pelagius's extant writings, and if Augustine has quoted from any of those, we should see whether Augustine is a faithful, reliable source of what those documents say. And the reason why I thought to think of this question and suggestion for Matt is because in my area on the semi Pelagians, you have John Cassian who writes this work, The Conferences. And what you have with one of his critics, Prosper of Aquitaine, who is a follower of Augustine, you have a work that he wrote against the Conferencer. So you can actually compare these two writings, and what happens is you see that Prosper actually was not a good source for conveying what his opponent said. So that's why I thought to suggest to Matt that he pursue this line further to check out Ali Bonner's method to see if that really held up or not. So that was a fun paper, and I knew Matt during my short tenure down in St. Louis during COVID. It was a rough year for me. Took a new job in COVID year, did not work out job wise, and just socially, COVID was terrible. So moved back up to Chicago, western suburbs. Happily still here in the western suburbs. Okay, let me move along to Friday, and I had to leave early to get back home Friday night, so I missed the afternoon sessions. But Friday morning, I attended a couple sessions looking at Irenaeus and Athanasius, Irenaeus and Vincent of Lorenz by my friend Jim Payton. Great paper there. And I got Jim on the record on what he thought about Vincent of Lorenz's Commonitorium. And if I recall correctly, Jim can correct me if he watches this, but I think he says he plants his flag on saying that the Commonitorium is anti-Augustinian. So it's nice to have him on my side on that. So it's fun, always great to see him and visit with Jim. Then I also attended a talk by John Taylor on tongues. His paper was titled Prayers of the Nations, the Gift of Tongues as Witness to the Multilingual Mission of the Church. I have gotten interest in trying to figure out what tongues is all about, and I've got a proposed theory that I've shared with others. It's complicated. Essentially, I think it's an actual language and not ecstatic utterances. And then there's sort of another question about whether this actual language is sort of received instantaneously or is it learned. There are other spiritual gifts that are all learned and honed, like teaching and administration. It's not like knowledge is imputed to us. So it's something different happening with healing and tongues. So that's something I'm thinking about. The text does give me some tricky spots there with my working theory. Then let's see here. Then I attended one final talk on by Gary Cook on Irenaeus and fidelity to the rule of faith, and so that was good. So a lot of these talks, historical theology for me, philosophical stuff, theological. So I dabble a little bit here and there in different areas. And then at 2 to 3 p.m., I attended the EPS business meeting where we discussed the finances and strategies to how to grow the EPS. Nice little group, almost a cohort. There are a lot of folks you see year after year, even people who are not on the executive committee, which I am not. But I like to be involved and try to, help people, help spread the word about the work of the EPS. So that's sort of a review. It was, again, like I said at the start of the stream here, it was a nice time to just visit and fellowship with people, to network and grow. I didn't do a paper this year. So a lot of people asked me, are you doing a paper? I said, I had to come up with what was the quick spiel. I said, oh, I'm just here to network and grow. And I like that. It's a good opportunity to meet new people, an opportunity to be challenged in my own thinking. It was also, so it was edifying for me, and it was also encouraging. Man, I got to get working on some of my other projects that I need to get published. Some of them like close to the finish line. I'm talking about the academic stuff, ministry stuff. Let me take a moment and talk about Doorway Crew, which is now on pre-order. So Doorway Crew, I'm a co-author of this new children's novel series called Doorway Crew. The first book is Gabby Goes to Ludicrum, written for 7 to 12-year-olds. It sort of depends on where your kid is at in the reading stage, but it's a chapter book. So think Magic Treehouse, think Hardy Boys, maybe not quite level of Hardy, maybe a little lower than Hardy Boys, but above Magic Treehouse if you're a parent. And so it's a nice little chapter book. And Doorway Crew is about an after-school club where the students have to observe and report what's happening on different planets, and each planet has something that's gone wrong. So it's a great little, slightly suspenseful, little mystery, but it's a great way of also introducing young people to philosophy and worldview, because again, there's something that has gone wrong on each planet, and usually that comes from behavior or an ideology. So we don't in the book, we don't call it sin, we don't call it heresy, but each book that we'll be writing has something like that. And so we've already got a draft of number 2. Conrad Goes to Rainbow Falls, so we'll be working on launching that next year. But Doorway Crew is available for pre-order. Go to defendersmedia.com. You can click Doorway Crew in the menu and learn more about the book and pre-order this and other swag. So if you want to check that out, again, defendersmedia.com for that. And I guess I should put up a landing page at Veracity Hill since I'm a co-author. So yeah, so I had a great time at ETS EPS. I'll be going next year. It's in Boston. I go every year, and I hope to see you there as well. Let me know if you have any questions. Looking at the comments here, Nick. Yes, I guess we did miss each other. I know you're in SoCal, but yeah, I didn't see you. And there was another gentleman, Vocab, that a buddy of mine I didn't see. It's just sometimes these are big conferences, and thousands of people, so you miss. Let's see here. We've got Idol Killer also saying Augustine employed 2 bishops deposed from the see, whom Zosimus called wicked liars. I'm skeptical of his good intentions. So getting back to the Heckel paper, I don't know that Matt's argument for good intentions is really all that strong, because people have good intentions all the time but still botch things, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Or if you have good intentions to fly a plane but you don't know how to fly a plane, what good are your intentions? So the question is one of actuality. Did Augustine reliably and faithfully convey what Pelagius said and what Pelagius meant when he wrote what he wrote? So at the end of the day, his intentions are in a sense irrelevant. I mean, maybe it's having good intentions are maybe a necessary condition for faithfully reliably conveying your opponent, but they're not a sufficient one. So, sorry if I'm getting into higher level categories here. All right, well, that does it for me. I just wanted to give you an update on ETS EPS. And so, if you are interested, I think the website is ETS Jets. You can do a Google search, Evangelical Theological Society. Tokyo Brown, is Dan McClellan an atheist? No, Dan McClellan is not an atheist. He is a progressive Mormon. Thanks for your question. He is sort of an interesting figure because, again, progressive Mormon. He identifies as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but he holds to this critical theorist perspective of hermeneutics of the biblical text. And I think his views on historical Mormonism are also interesting. So he's sort of like a liberal Mormon. You might think, hey, they're liberal Christians, and what they think about the Bible, maybe very little historical grounding, but theological truth, something like that. Well, he's sort of a similar Mormon, and so yeah, not an atheist. So he is a theist, but progressive Mormon. I know some of his stuff can be weird, so you might struggle to figure out what type of person he is. A very good question, Tokyo Brown. Thanks for watching the stream today. All right, well, I will tune off here and hope to see you next week. Again, we're still setting up my office, so we've got to set up tech, but the floor needs to be finished. So hopefully, a week, maybe two, and then we'll be back up to our regular format with the cameras and the intro music and the slides, all the production. But hey, let me know what you think about this live, this sort of mobile live using my phone today. If you like this interaction as well, and maybe we'll keep doing stuff like this throughout the week. So thanks for tuning in today. We'll be in touch.